2022 Park Advisory Committee meeting of the East Bay Regional Park District. And let's start, Madam Secretary, with the roll call, please.
Absolutely. Good afternoon, everyone. We will start roll call with Vice Chair Tsutsui.
Here.
Hello, Member Arce. I do not believe we have Member Arce. Member Burke.
Present.
Hello, welcome. Member Carey.
Do you want to sit right here?
Thank you. Member Carey. Member Chang.
So you can be on camera.
Hello, Member Chang. Thank you. Member Claxton.
Here.
Hello.
Hello.
Member Corkin.
Present.
Hello. Member Deschambault. I do not think we have Member Deschambault. Member Dieter.
Here.
Hello, welcome Member Dieter. Member Lacey.
Here.
Hello, Member Mahadevan.
Here.
Welcome, Member Nason.
Here.
Hello, welcome, Member Rickard.
Here.
Welcome, Member Robinson.
Here.
Welcome, Member Robinson. Member San Juan.
Here.
Welcome. Hello, Member Simmons.
Here.
Hello, good to see you. Member Skardoff.
Here.
Welcome. Member Williams. I do not believe we have Member Williams. Chair Obringer.
I am present. Thank you.
You are welcome. And in addition to PAC members, we have board member Ellen Corbett joining us as well. A welcome to her. Thank you for making time. We also have Assistant General Manager Jim O'Connor, Assistant General Manager Anthony Chaburo, Assistant General Manager Christina Kelchner here with us. Additionally, we have Brian Holt, we have Sean Dugan, we have Chief of Government and Legislative Affairs Eric Feeler. We also have Sharon Clay, myself, and Sydney Erickson. I hope I didn't miss anyone, but I believe that concludes roll call.
Thank you very much. And now I'm going to make one of my standard virtual meeting announcements, so please bear with me for the sake of the public. The purpose of conducting the meeting as described in this notice is to provide the safest environment for staff and the public while allowing for public participation. Pursuant to the Brown Act as amended by AB 361, the Board of Directors and staff may participate in board meetings via phone video conferencing and/or through a hybrid of in-person and remote attendance. The East Bay Regional Park District, I will be referring to as Park District going forward, intends to hold meetings through either an entirely virtual platform or a hybrid of in-person attendance with the Board of Directors, designated staff, and limited members of the public to participate in person at the Park District headquarters located at 2950 Peralta Oaks Court in Oakland, California, and through the Park District's virtual platform Zoom. If the committee decides to hold a hybrid in-person meeting, attendance by members of the public will be subject to maximum capacity of 5, as well as compliance with current health and safety protocols. This information can be found on our agenda on the district website, abparks.org. Do any committee members have any questions about the meeting procedures? Okay, hearing none, we're going to move on to the agenda. And the next item on the agenda is item B, item 2, approval of our minutes from our last meeting on March 28th. If you would please call the roll.
You want a motion?
Oh, you know what? Thank you so much. Yes, is there a motion to approve the meeting minutes from March 28th?
I so move. Second.
Thank you. Okay, so I heard Andrew as the motion maker and Igor as the second. So any discussion or any revisions to those minutes before we vote on them?
I have a comment.
Okay.
I was looking over the minutes and I know I'm not sure if there's been a little change of policy. Is the public supposed to watch the video to find out what was said? because I know a lot more was said than what's in the minutes. Not that I expect a detailed description, but it more seems like the agenda was rewritten as opposed to the actual minutes. So I'm a little uncomfortable approving them until I know if it just seems different this month.
And so I will just share with you, and then maybe staff can, or maybe board member Corbett as well. So I had the opportunity, along with Michelle Lacey and Bob Simmons, to meet with board director Lane a few weeks ago, and she did indicate to us that there had been a change in how the minutes were being provided at the board level. And so she anticipated that we would see a change in our minutes as well. And so it sounds like that was an administrative decision that's applying to all the bodies within the park district. So that is the knowledge that I have to share. And I just wanted to see if there were others who could provide additional clarity for us.
Eric Feeler, Chief of Government Affairs. Yes, Chair Oberninger, that is the administrative directive to use action minutes, knowing that everything is being videotaped and recorded. And we are doing that for every committee across the board.
Okay, thank you. So with that said, you are correct, Irene, in noting the change. And it sounds like it is a decision that is outside of the control of the PAC. So with that said, is there anything else that anyone would like to, any other revisions, questions that people might have?
I can tell you that when this issue came up, there were some board members that asked questions too about whether this is the good way to go or not. So there will continue to be some discussions, I'm sure, about how we're going to do this, whether we're going to do it this way or maybe have some changes to that. So if any of you have any opinions, please share them.
Okay, thank you. So I don't know if it's if we should take those opinions now, or maybe if people could follow up with their director to let them know how you feel about it. So we did hear, Irene, your concern. And so if others would like to share with their board member so that can be addressed at the board level.
You might also want to share it with your director too of the PAC, so he can put that together and share it with us. That would be a good way to do it too.
Thank you. That's an excellent suggestion.
And I also, just to add on to that, it's just maybe it's important just for the public to advise people to go to the video if this is to find out what happened, because they're not going to find out what happened by reading the minutes. That's all I just wanted to add.
Well, that's a good point. And so maybe if we could hear from staff where people can go to watch the video, since we are recording this meeting, it would be helpful for people to know, as Irene suggested, where people can watch the full conversation. Is there a particular spot on the ebparks.org website where people can easily find the recordings?
Absolutely, I can speak to that. It will be practiced in the minutes to include the link to the Park District's YouTube website so that folks can rewatch the entire recording or wind into what they're interested in viewing in the meeting.
How long are the minutes?
Thank you.
I mean, the video is kept?
Yes.
And I think you asked how long? Is that what you asked, Deb?
How long? I mean, for how long? Is it 6 months, 90 days? Just curious. Or forever? It'd take a lot of space, but.
I don't have the answer to that. That's a great question. I can find out.
I don't know for certain, but I do think it is a lot more than the timeframes you spoke about, Deb. I think it might be even in years, and that is.
There are some.
Yeah, and that's despite the fact that people are talking about changing the minutes. The fact that even before that, we have this better system with regard to looking up minutes in person because of all the way we put things together these days. And that's actually a good thing, I think.
And I will just share that in my home city of Concord, we did make this change. I think when I was on the planning commission, we used to have more detailed minutes, and then it went to action minutes. And, the way we have it now, we only have the videos going back. I think this is 2022. So going back available to 2018. So it's a 4-year, because it is a storage issue and you do have to pay for storage so longer. So, I understand your concerns, Irene, because 100 years from now, none of us are going to be here and people might want to know what we said. So I think it's not something we're going to resolve today, but if you do have concerns, please do share them both with Eric as well as with your director, so that we can come to, a reasonable accommodation around this. Okay, anybody else before we take our vote? I'm looking, I don't see anybody else's hand raised. So Madam Secretary, if you would, I'm sorry, Rochelle, I didn't see your physical hand.
Okay. Yeah, I had a question about watching. You mentioned watching on YouTube, but I thought that we would also be able to watch on PrimeGov. I've noticed that we've had representatives from PrimeGov sitting in here, and there's a big advantage because if you look at it through a facility like PrimeGov, you should be able to jump to the agenda item that you are interested in, as opposed to watching the whole meeting or, putting it forward minute by minute, looking for what you're looking for. And I think that the board meetings will be on PrimeGov. I'm assuming that the PAC meetings will as well. And that's a better way to watch.
And I have to be honest, I'm not familiar with PrimeGov. So I do see someone, so Sydney Erickson, it says PrimeGov. So I don't know if there's someone who can explain more about that and if that is going to be an option for viewing the meetings.
Yeah, so the video recordings are still hosted on YouTube. If you view the agenda through PrimeGov, we offer an HTML agenda where you can view the YouTube video along with your agenda. And if the video has been timestamped, then when you click on particular agenda items, it'll jump to that item in the YouTube video as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
All right, anyone else? I'm looking for both physical and virtual hands. Okay, I don't see any. So if Madam Secretary, if you could please call roll for this item. We have a motion and a second for approval.
For approval of the minutes, Vice Chair Tsutsui.
Aye.
Member Arce?
Yes.
Member Burke?
Aye.
Thank you. Member Carey?
Aye.
Member Chang?
Yes.
Member Claxton?
Yes.
Member Corkin?
Nay.
Member Corkin is nay. Thank you. Member Deschambault? I believe is not present. Member Dieter?
I'm going to abstain.
Abstain. Thank you, Member Dieter. Member Lacey?
Yes.
Thank you, Member Lacey. Member Mahadevan?
Aye.
Member Nason?
Aye.
Member Rickard?
Aye.
Member Robinson?
Aye.
Thank you. Member San Wong?
Yes.
Member Simmons?
Yes.
Member Skardoff?
Aye.
Member Williams? I believe Member Williams is not present, and Chair Obringer.
Yes.
Thank you. That concludes this motion.
Thank you. So it's now my pleasure to introduce Board Member Ellen Corbett, who represents Ward 4, who will be making some comments to the PAC tonight, the PAC.
Well, thank you very much. It's very nice to be here with all of you. And I'm going to report on a few little items that you're probably paying attention to, but reports that we've had recently. And before I do that, I want to let you know that there is an open position for the PAC in Ward 4. And I am very interested in seeing if Luana España might become our new PAC board member. And she's here with us. She might want to just say hello and wave at folks as we work with the process of going through the forms and all that. Luana.
Hi, my name is Luana España, and I'm very excited about this possible opportunity. Great love for the East Bay Regional Parks and have had opportunities to serve as an ambassador all the way to the Trail User Working Group, and also be a board member of organizations like the Bay Area Ridge Trail. So I love the East Bay Parks, and thank you for having me here tonight.
Thank you, Luana. Welcome. All right, well, let me talk about a few projects that we're working on, have been working on for quite a time. Let me start with the Oyster Bay Park. I'm sure many of you are very familiar with that and probably have spent some time there. There are many, many parks. This one's, of course, along the Bay shoreline, not too far from the airport and right next to the Bay Trail. And there's several projects that are becoming very popular or can become popular in the future. One, many of you may know that back in October, we opened up our disc golf facility, and it's a very popular place. And I welcome you all to go down and take a look if you want to learn more about how to be a disc player and just watch some of the fun work that they get involved in there. But that's very popular. And then also something important at Oyster Bay is that we have been planning since the very beginning of time as we turn over this former landfill site to have an infrastructure for travel bike skills for riders of all ages. So that is a plan that we're continuing to move forward to make sure that we have a place to do some training for folks on going up hills and around circles, and just a nice little spot. It's a location, a place where riders can develop mountain biking skills, and it's located along the Bay Trail, as I mentioned already. And we're going ahead and continuing to develop that area. So I hope you're interested in that. It's a nice little spot. There's some maps showing the planning, and I think it'll be a great place for people to spend a little time. And in addition to that, we just had a report at our last board meeting, and a report that's called Approaching the Vegetation Management and Tree Mortality in Our Many, Many Park Areas. I'm sure many of you know the work that our chief and assistant chief have been working on for the last several months, tracking the trees that are affected by some other problems, dying down and having to be separated and those sorts of things. And we're learning about what is impacting our trees. Not all is known, but drought stress certainly can be part of that impact. And there's 1,500 acres of forest and trees impacted throughout our park area. And we're developing field break and separating space areas, to help us stay away from any major fire issues. So we're looking at the challenges of removing the trees that are impacted and removing the biomass and determining where to place it and the best way to use it. In some cases, in the old-fashioned way would be to just take things down and move it out. But now there may be some possible environmental benefits where we can reuse the biomass that's left over from the trees, which might be a very, very popular thing. Use it to improve the park's land and maybe keep from moving it, save a little money that way, and use the biochar for beneficial use. So those are several projects that we're working on. I'm sure you know of a few more, but we always appreciate your thoughts on that and your support of those projects as well. As you know, we have wonderful staff that works extremely hard to keep our parks beautiful and safe. And especially since we have so much extra use of our parks in all different ways these days, as more and more people get a chance to get outside. until we get over some of these, health issues. But in the meantime, thank you all for, looking positive at the best things we can do for all our park users. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for the update. Do we have any questions for Director Corbett? It looks like Igor, you've got both physical and virtual hands up there.
Double hand up. Thank you, Director Corbett. I'm on I'm connected with the John Muir National Historic Site here in Martinez, and we have a lot of tree issues like that. So if it might be possible to send along some of the information, especially how do you reuse the biomass, I'd like to have access to that so I could pass that along to our friends here.
Okay, I'll ask our staff. I know there was a report that was put out by the chief and the assistant chief, and perhaps that's something we can share with you. If Eric and staff can figure that out and get what we can get to Igor, it would be good.
Yeah, it'd be trees that maybe John Muir knew, so.
Yes, and we have, different types of trees. You have eucalyptus, and what should, do we want to recover that, or do we want to come up with something new that's more native? There's so many questions to be asked as we deal with the forest areas.
Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and I'm looking to see if we have other questions from folks. And I don't see any other hands. So thank you very much, Director Corbett. You're welcome to stay with us for the rest of our meeting.
I did want to say one last thing.
Please.
Just want to say thank you to Brian Holt and staff, who's going to be talking about some other very important and interesting issues, and asking for PAC to take a look and put together information and have some new ideas of what's the best thing to do to protect our trails. So thank you all for being part of that. And we want to thank Brian for all the great, amazing work he's been doing to pick up information and determine what's the best thing to do.
Thank you. We look forward to that robust conversation in just a few minutes about the trails.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving on to our next agenda item. So we're going to receive a foundation update from Carol Johnson, Assistant General Manager of Public Affairs.
Greetings, everybody. It's very nice to see many of you who I haven't seen in a while, and very nice to meet you, those that I have not yet to meet in person. I am the Executive Director currently for the Regional Parks Foundation, and I'm happy tonight to share that I have a very exciting announcement that former Director John Sutter's passing last year, he left a very significant legacy gift to the Regional Parks Foundation. I have reported on that in the past. In addition to that, he left a second significant legacy gift, which we were not expecting. And it was put to his daughters to decide where that second legacy gift would be spent within the Regional Parks district. And tonight I'm here to announce that we will be sharing with the Park District $1 million on behalf of the Sutter family to replace and upgrade the Roberts Pool at Roberts Regional Park. It was a very special place to the family, as well as a continued special location for the children, the daughters of Judge Sutter and his wife Ellie, to take their own kids. So that is a very exciting announcement that I'm here to make. It is not official yet because I have to take it before my board, and then we will be taking it to the district board sometime likely in June. But that's an announcement that it's always a good day to make. So that's my acknowledgement tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from the PAC about that? Okay, well, thank you very much. So that is good news indeed. Okay, so the next item on our agenda is public comment. And so I anticipate we'll have quite a few folks who want to make public comment regarding our trail use discussion. But we ask that if that is the topic that you want to make public comment about, that you wait until item number 6A. So this time is for public comment for items that are not on the agenda. So do we have anyone, Madam Secretary, who would like to make public comment regarding an item not on the agenda?
Thank you, Chair Obringer. I would ask that those folks please raise their hand virtually. Again, this is for items that are not listed on the agenda. So if you have a general public comment, this is the open public comment period to share a statement. We have added asterisks to names of attendees who will be, who are interested, who are members of the public. But at this time, I don't see anyone raising their hand to make a general public comment. You can also turn your video on if that is not the case. I see Joel Schrock, and I believe you may have had a general public comment. Is that right, Joel?
Yeah, actually, my comment was related to trail usage.
Okay, related to trail usage. And
chime in later.
Nico, sure. And just so folks know, and I see Nico's question listed here, item 6A is the trail use discussion on our agenda. So if all members are attending to share a comment about that item, I think it's safe to proceed.
Okay, great. All right, then without further ado, the big item on our agenda here, the trail use discussion, which is going to be presented by Brian Holt, Chief of Planning, Trails, and GIS. So we'd love to hear your presentation, Brian. Then we will receive clarifying questions from committee members and then take public comment.
Thank you very much, Chair Obinger. I'm going to hand it over to Christina Kelchner, Assistant General Manager of Acquisition, Stewardship, and Development, just to introduce the item.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Chair Obinger, and good afternoon, Director Corbett and members of the Park Advisory Committee. I am Christina Kelchner, Assistant General Manager here at the Park District. And in tonight's meeting, we will be continuing our conversation about trails. The Park District, the board and staff really appreciates the PAC taking up this important issue. Trails, of course, is the #1 way that everybody engages with our parks. And so it's a very important issue. At the last PAC meeting, Brian Holt gave an overview of the report that came out of the Trail User Working Group. And that's on our website. You should all have a copy of that. And we sort of kicked off our handoff from the Trail User Working Group to the PAC. Brian also gave a look ahead of some of the issues that are going to be coming forward to the PAC in the coming months in talking about trails. And reflecting on that meeting from last time, I asked Brian to come back this month and give you all a little more background about the trails conversation here at the Park District. Some of you have been engaged in this conversation about trails and trail use for a long time, and some of you are relatively new to the conversation. So I just wanted Brian to kind of pull together some things that we had shared over the past few years so that everybody's grounded in that same background as we move forward. So thanks to Brian for that. And also just to acknowledge the Park District staff. The Park District does have a small but mighty team of trail experts who are real deep experts in trail design and building of trails. And that is Sean Dugan, our Trails Development Manager, and he has 2 staff, Sean and Suzanne, who hopefully you've had a chance to interact with. So they are all an important part of this team as well. So I'm going to hand it off to Brian to give you that background, but I just wanted to make 3 points before I hand it over to Brian. First of all, trails is a really big topic, and there probably are a lot of different opinions about how the PAC could go about engaging with that, what the scope of it could be. So I just wanted to say clearly up front, what the board and what staff needs most from the PAC is to hear from all of you as community leaders. What are you hearing in your communities? What are the conversations? What are the concerns? Is it about more access? Is it a more variety of access? What are you seeing and hearing in your communities? And so I'd like to really give you all some homework between now and the next PAC meeting, when we will have another item on trails to bring back to the board and to staff, so that we can hear from you, because you're really uniquely positioned as leaders in your communities to bring us that feedback about what you're hearing about trails. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, just as trails is a big topic, it can also be an emotional topic. And we have found that working through these issues, they can invoke a lot of passion. And that's because everybody loves our parks. We love our parks. We need the nature, we need the respite, we need the rejuvenation that we get from being out in the wild, in the wilderness. And so people are passionate about parks and about trails. One thing that we have found is helpful as we're navigating through these issues is to try to recognize when we're talking about data and facts and when we're talking about perceptions. And State Parks has actually done some interesting work on this topic. And if you go back to the 2019 board workshop that we did, which is available on our website, you can find some information in there pulled from that State Parks report. And what the study found is that user conflicts can be influenced as much by perceptions and preference as by actual experience with other users on the trail. So we tend to come to these issues, all of us, without maybe realizing it, about what is the right way to enjoy a park or enjoy a trail or be out in nature. So I just wanted to plant that seed so you can be aware of that in your own perceptions, and as you listen to the members of your community and of course to each other here on the PAC. In the State Park study, the study found that the concern about conflicts was really high, but that the actual number of reported incidents was very low. And we see that in the park districts as well. And there was a study done in Oregon that actually found that concern about trail user conflicts was higher among members, trail users who had never encountered member of another trail user group. So someone who'd never had a negative experience actually had a higher concern than someone who had actually had the experience. So, and that's also in the 2019 report, you can find that information as well. So just to flag that, to be aware, it's something that's harder to talk about, harder to get at, but that it's very real, that perceptions, philosophy, attitudes, behaviors play a big issue here. And the final thing I wanted to say is that our parks are very popular. Our parks have always been popular. And of course, during the pandemic, that popularity has really skyrocketed. And that's true across users. We just have more visitors overall to our parks. It's particularly true about mountain bikers. In many of our parks, the use by mountain bikers has doubled or tripled. And that's not unique to the East Bay Regional Park District, that's nationwide. So the question about bikes in our parks is not going away. And we do need to figure out a way to address these issues safely, sustainably, and people may not agree on things, but I think whether you're concerned about bootleg trails or not enough mountain bike trails, or you just want more access and more trails overall, I think everyone can agree that what we're currently doing could use some improvement. So I'm looking forward to working with the PAC and having you dive into these issues as you help us hear from your communities and figure out how we move this forward. So I will turn this over to Brian Hope.
Thank you very much, Christina, and thank you to the chair and to the members of the commission. Are you all able to hear me right? All right, great. I had some mic troubles earlier, but I think I restarted, so hopefully we're all good. I'm going to share my screen here, and we're going to be talking about trails. So we're going to dive right into this, and I know we have a number of members of the public to speak. So, so I'm going to just sort of jump into why are we talking about trails. Staff at the Park District spends a lot of time planning for new trails. And this is trails within existing parklands, but also trails within new parklands. And we'll get into some of our land bank areas and new parks and some of the challenges there. And then there's, of course, the ongoing managing trails in our existing parklands as well. And as Christina said, why we're talking about trails is just there's competing demands for trail access. There's significant growth in park users, particularly amongst mountain bikers and hikers. And we have recognized a need to just develop some common trail terminology. So we're all speaking the same language when we're talking about trails. And also just recognizing the need to dispel some trail myths. It's been circulated around in the community that the park district is proposing to open up all multi-use trails to mountain biking. That's a myth. It's not true. And there's been a number of things that have been circulated around out there that aren't true. But really what we're working to do is address some demand in a very sustainable and measured sort of manner. And so why do trails matter? Trails connect people to our parks, and this has been shown again and again. Trail use consistently shows up as the most preferred activity in parks. For most of our parks, trails are the way that you engage in our parks. So whether you're on hoof or boot or tire, trails, that's how you interact with our parks. So so it really matters to everybody. Our trails do, right? And the trail experience matters to everybody, and not every trail experience is the same. So again, I know I've gone over this before, but just to reiterate some of our master plan policy, we do have policies in our master plan from 2013 that says that we'll work to expand our unpaved multi-use trail network as additional acreage and new parks are added. So that's to link parks together and to provide access to visitor use destinations and to provide satisfactory trail experiences. The master plan further states that trails can be designed and designated to accommodate either single use or multiple users as appropriate based on location, recreational intensity, environmental and safety concerns. So this is an area that we spend a lot of times in conversations. I would say would kind of get at Christina's comments about perception and trail experiences. So I just want to kind of go through some of our trail types. Trails are really as diverse as our park users. So of course, a lot of folks are familiar with our paved regional trails. This is the Bay Trail, the Iron Horse Trail, the Contra Costa Canal Trail. These are multi-use trails. They're used for hiking. They can be used for equestrians. They're used for biking. They're often used for commuting just as much as they are for recreation. This is part of our transportation network. They're multi-jurisdictional, so they might be managed by the park district. They might be managed by the city where the trail is located or another entity. And just want to emphasize that these are not the trails that we're discussing in this conversation. We're not discussing our paved regional trails. That's another conversation for another time. What we are discussing is our natural surface trail network. And the vast majority of the park district's natural surface trail network consists of fire roads and EVMA, emergency vehicle maintenance access. These are inherited ranch roads. They're roads that essentially came to us with the property. They're not built for recreational purposes, but they're often used for recreation. They're also used for park maintenance, emergency access, grazing management, and other things. And as I mentioned, they comprise the vast majority of the Park District Trail Network. And often you'll hear in this discussion, and we'll get to who has access to what trails, this talking point that mountain bikers and others have access to thousands of miles of trails. And what they're really saying is that they have access to thousands of miles of fire roads. And fire roads serve a purpose. They can provide a good connection to nature and a satisfactory experience in certain instances, but they can also provide a non-satisfactory experience. Often they're too steep, or they're perhaps unsafe because of the loose surface. They're open and exposed, and there's just a variety of reasons why fire roads, while they serve their purpose in some instances, do not always provide the most satisfactory recreation experience. So then we have our social trails, the informal trail network. And I think a lot of people are familiar with these. This is a picture of Pleasanton Ridge. You can see sort of the official trail that goes through, and then a number of social trails that are cut off. These are created by humans, but I would say more often than not, they're created by animals, created by cattle, who are doing what's just logical and sort of cutting off from one place to the other, making shortcuts. And they become part of the landscape, and they get used both by humans and animals, and really by all trail users. They're not officially designated for any use. They're not developed to sustainable trail standards. That's not to say that they have an environmental impact, but they're just haven't necessarily been developed to any trail standards. They're not officially designated for any use. They're not necessarily identified in our plans or called out for any specific use, but nonetheless, they do get used. And we see more of these, and it's more common in our parks where we haven't gone through the process of building what's called purpose-built trails. And I'll discuss that more. But we see these more in places where we haven't gone through the intentional action of building trails for specific purposes. And then there's the bootleg trails. These are the unsanctioned purpose-built trails, but that are created by park users. These aren't created by park staff. These are unsanctioned, but built by park users. These aren't always developed to sustainable trail standards. They can be unsafe or erosive due to lack of formal management. And these sorts of trails are often much more common in parks where you lack the sanctioned purpose-built trails, the trails that go through the official sort of process. So just for example, I'll mention Coyote Hills, where we have built purpose-built trails. We don't see many of these types of bootleg trails, whereas some of our other parks where we have not built purpose-built trails, we see a lot more of these types of instances. So purpose-built trails, so what are these? These are trails that are built specifically with the recreational end user in mind. These are built to sustainable trail standards, mean they've gone through the environmental review process. We're looking at where we're avoiding sensitive resources, we're providing an appropriate grade and drainage features so that the trails are low maintenance, and that we're avoiding some of the environmental impacts of grading trails, and just really kind of go through that. You know, essentially it's an engineering process. There's a whole science behind this, behind trail building. There's a whole network of professional trail builders who go and receive education and training and certification to build trails in natural environments. And this is their skill set, and their expertise is building purpose-built trails. Now, purpose-built trails can be multi-use, they can be dual use, they could just be hiker and equestrian, or they could be single-use trails, whether it's just hiker only, biker only, equestrian only. They can be really anything. So most often we see purpose-built trails in other jurisdictions built for multi-use, but they can be built for any purposes. So some of the considerations there are you including pinch points, sort of facilities that can provide for speed controls? These are natural sort of features that are incorporated into the trail to control things like speed, where you're directing people to where you want them to go, or away from where you don't want them to go. These are all sort of considerations that go into purpose-built trails. You're specifically looking at avoiding sort of fall line trail conditions where you're sending trails straight down a hill that will direct water in an erosive manner. So you're designing your trail to be lighter on the landscape and provide a more satisfactory user experience. So then there's the sort of increasingly emerging concept of the flow trail. And this is a purpose-built trail, but that's built to provide a very specific trail experience. And that trail experience it's kind of a downhill, flowy trail experience, generally used by mountain bikers. And this is sort of the experience that winding across the landscape, you're not necessarily having to pedal. You have a series of turns, grade reversals that help you manage your speed. There can be features such as berms and tabletops or other features that really are designed specifically for the mountain bike experience. And this is what we have heard from a number of our trail users, an interest in seeing more of. And these are trails that are developed to sustainable trail standards. Our best example at the East Bay Regional Park District is Coyote Hills I'm sorry, not Coyote Hills. That's got that wrong. That's Crockett Hills Regional Park. Sorry, last minute typo there, but Crockett Hills Regional Park, which is our longest single track trail that we have within the park district that's bike accessible. It was purpose built for as a flow trail to accommodate mountain bikers. And we've seen it's been a successful facility at Crockett Hills. And we've seen a number of other examples across the region. There's the demonstration, the trail, the SoCal demonstration forest. There's the Pogonut Trail in Santa Cruz County. There's a series of trails up in North Bay that are quite popular. So we continue to hear interest on these. And I'll just say, this is not an appropriate trail to be developed in every park. And not every trail should be designed like this. And what we have continued to hear is there might be some very specific places, we're not necessarily talking about everywhere or every park, but where we can accommodate this type of trail experience. And that's something that we as staff are looking at or are wrestling with, is if this is something that could be accommodated within our park system. Then there's the sort of special use areas. And you heard Director Corbett speak earlier about Oyster Bay Bike Park. That was a bike park facility that was evaluated and approved in the Oyster Bay Land Use Plan. These are dedicated areas within parks that serve certain users. You know, traditionally we had equestrian facilities that were around that equestrians would use. We still have a number of equestrian stables and arenas. And there's growing interest in bike skills parks. This picture is of the Stafford Lake Bike Skill Park in Novato. It's a very popular park with families who use, there's a kids flow trail and there's jumps. It occupies about 10 acres of a much larger park, whereas bikes are not permitted elsewhere in the much larger park. They're really designated within the special use area that's built specifically to serve mountain bikers. The bike park doesn't necessarily replace the trail experience. There's still an interest in having that trail experience, but it does meet a certain demand for bike access and might be an appropriate type of facility to consider in some of our parks. And like I said, we have evaluated that. And in Oyster Bay, there was an area designated for bike skills. And we've moved forward and developed a draft concept plan of what that might look like at Oyster Bay. So having a kids track and a skills park, a jump park, some maintenance area, and also an opportunity to provide some education around sustainable bike access, how to be a considerate park user on a bike, and be a place to where you can capture people early on as they're developing bike skills to educate them on good trail etiquette. So why we're having this conversation again is the Park District has been very successful to our benefit and growing. So you can see the orange properties here are land bank properties. And these are properties that some of them we're actively working on, looking at how we can open up to the public. Some others are in what I would say is a long-term land bank status. We're not necessarily ready to talk about opening them up to the public for a variety of reasons. But for those areas that we are looking to open up to the public, we consistently hear an interest in expanding mountain bike access. We also hear interest in ensuring that we're protecting and providing for equestrian access and for satisfactory hiking experiences as well. So we're trying to balance all this along with our first interest, which is always to protect the natural and cultural resources within our parks. So working at and managing each of those things, but working towards opening up these land bank properties. So as I mentioned before, you'll have a couple of plans coming to you this year and next that look to open up park access into some of these land bank properties where trail issues are very much part of the conversation. So again, since 1995, the Park District has added over 56,000 acres of new parkland. And that's not open parkland, it's just, those are new acquisitions that are largely land bank today. But since that time, we have only constructed, and these are those purpose-built trails that I mentioned that we're interested in. We've only constructed 13 miles of new trails. And again, The vast majority of that, 8.75 miles, have been within one park, within Crockett Hills. So we do recognize the need to construct new trails for mountain bikers, but also new trails for equestrians, hikers, just trails for all. Not necessarily saying that all trails should be for all people all the time, but looking at what trails can accommodate what users and which locations. So we have not constructed any new trails and new parklands. I will say we are going to be able to update this figure because we are working on developing 1.5 miles of new trails associated with the Tyler Ranch staging area at Pleasanton Ridge that we hope will be opened up later this year. So again, going back to our trail system, our vast majority of our quote unquote trails are roads. These are ranch roads that were not built for recreational purposes. So they do not have a recreational experience in mind. They very well may serve a recreational use. They might be great for climbing up, but maybe not great for descending or any number of things. But those are the vast majority of our trails, and those. And then we have 120 miles of paved trails. Those are those regional trails that I discussed. And then that green slice of the pie, 15% of our trail network is the unpaved, the natural surface trail network that we have. And generally these trails are, per our ordinance, Ordinance 38, less than 8 feet in width, and are generally do not allow for bicycle use on there unless specifically exempted by the board. So of those 200 miles of purpose-built trails that we have, of actual trails that we have, 100% of those trails are accessible to foot. All of the trails are accessible to hikers. 50%, 57%, the majority of those trails are accessible to equestrians. But only 50 miles are accessible to bicycles. So this is when you hear comments about equitable park access or trail access from the mountain biking community. This is what they're referring to, that they do not have equitable access to our trails within the park district. They recognize they have access to all of the road network. But again, this is not something that is addressing their specific interests. So why do we care? And we heard the comment last time, are we only hearing from a very vocal subset of the community, or is this actually something that we should be worried about? We've seen mountain biking growing in our parks for a long time, but in particular post-COVID, the growth exploded. And there's headlines that you've seen in nationwide papers about mountain bike sales growing anywhere from 100 to 500%. You can talk to any of the bike owners and the bike shop owners in the East Bay, and they had trouble keeping bikes in their shop. They were flying off the shelves. People were pulling old bikes out of their garages and fixing them up, and they were getting out. And I would say that the majority of the increase in mountain biking that you're seeing here are not what I think a lot of people think of when they think of mountain bikers, which are, guys in the full face helmet and the gear and armor. Now, the growth is coming from families. The growth is coming from people who weren't able to go to the gym. The growth is coming from, there's a lot of growth amongst women in mountain biking, and just really across the board. So we've seen well over 100% increase in the number of trips of mountain bikers from 2019 to today. So that's a significant increase, and they're all competing for that same access on those, that 25% of our trails that are actually accessible to them. And it gets interesting when we look at the specific parks that we're seeing the growth in. So Crockett Hills, again, the park that we actually have legal purpose-built trails for, saw a huge increase, 342% increase in the mountain bike trips that you saw to Crockett Hills. Really significant increases in Wildcat and Tilden. And a lot of that increase is coming from the high school mountain bike teams. So El Cerrito High, Berkeley High, a lot of the high schools that are around Wildcat and Tilden often ride in our parks. And so that's where we're seeing a lot of growth and a lot of requests to expand our trail network. And we'll talk a little bit more about those. And then you're seeing Sibley, which we had discussed during the Sibley land use plan. We had a lot of interest from the mountain biking community in that park. Briones, as we have talked about, will be bringing back to the PAC to discuss some pilot project proposals there. And then you can see the other parks there. So we're not seeing mountain bike increases in all of our parks. So some parks don't necessarily lend themselves to mountain biking. You don't necessarily see people clamoring to go to Sunol or some of our others, but for those parks like Pleasanton Ridge and Briones that you can grab a bike and leave out your back door and access the parkland, which is really the asset of those parks, you are seeing big increases. And those parks that, like I say, where we've built purpose-built trails, you're also seeing significant increases. So just mention the growth of mountain biking as a high school sport has been really significant. So I think you've heard about this before. I know you've received a lot of public comments about it. The graph on top, this is the Wildcat composite team coming out of El Cerrito High and others, where you can see the growth, over the past decade has just been really significant. A lot of boys, but a significant and growing number of girls. And then you can see across the country, NICA, the National Interscholastic Cycling Association, has really been growing high school biking as a sport across the country. So this is growing, and I know they would be more than willing to come to the PAC and share their experiences, what they're seeing in terms of who is participating in mountain biking as a high school sport, and sort of what they're seeing with regards to those kids who are attracted to this. But this is often what we're hearing very much from. So in the NorCal League, there are 84 high school mountain bike teams that are operating. So it's really a question of who we invite into our parks. We heard throughout the trail user working group, some folks who said that, mountain biking is an extreme sport and does not belong in our parks at all. And then others who have really advocated that the park district should be more embracing of mountain biking. And that's really some of the question that we're dealing with here. So some of the tools that we can use for better trails. I mentioned just engineering. That's just building trails, those purpose-built trails that meet the needs of the park users, whether those are single-use trails or multi-use trails. Building purpose-built trails that provide that satisfactory trail experience. We've seen it where we build those trails, we don't see the same bootleg trail construction. We see more support for our trails. We see more volunteerism in terms of volunteering to come out and help maintain our trails, and just really across the board better stewardship where we're actually building those trails with the recreational user in mind. Education is a key component. We put up our bike bells stations recently. The campaign for Trails Are for Everyone, really how do we continue to educate our users regarding responsible trail use is a key part of it. You'll continue to hear about enforcement. There's always a contingent that's very interested in increased enforcement. There have been the recent enforcement actions in Pleasanton Ridge, and in other areas. And I'll just say, I agree enforcement is a tool in a very targeted way, but I'm going to channel some of our police officers a little bit in that they really want to focus on the bad behavior rather than just enforcing people who are out trying to enjoy their parks. And so I think enforcement is an important tool, but should not be relied as the only tool to provide a safe and welcoming park experience. Considerations for the natural environment, like I say, are paramount, and that really drives all of our trails decision. I think I received some comments from one of the PAC members at our recent trail user working group luncheon that, the answer to this just seems simple. Just build trails, separate trails for bikers and separate trails for hikers. We would love to do that. Our environment does not allow us to do that. We're working in sensitive environments here with topography that just does not allow you to put in trails wherever you want without having really significant habitat impacts. So we're really trying to minimize the trail footprint to minimize the impacts on the natural environment. And again, if we provide that satisfactory trail user experience, we know that we'll have more support for the park district, more support for our trails, more ownership of our trails, and more support of maintaining our trails and whatnot there. So with that, going into a couple of the projects that are going to come to the PAC where these are going to become questions. And that's really part of this discussion here and why we want to develop this common trail terminology and really get down to what are we really talking about? What are the issues here? So Roddy Ranch Golf Course is one. We went out there on a board field trip on Friday. A number of the PAC members were with us. And the issue here is you have a wide open grassland, a former golf cart course with golf cart paths winding throughout the area that would be removed, and we would be building new trails. Currently, we propose the outer perimeter trails as accessible multi-use trails. These would be 8-foot wide trails, accessible to all users. And the trails within the interior would be 4-foot wide paths. And that really is for habitat protection purposes. We're limited on the amount of acreage that we can impact within the HCP area. So we want to minimize that footprint. We've also looked at it from a professional trail design standpoint that this is an open grassland. We feel that people can recreate on a narrower trail safely. They'll be able to see each other and avoid each other. We don't expect the trail conflicts to occur out there. And then lastly, we just don't see this as the type of park that we're going to see some of the hardcore bike use that people are afraid of. What we see on these interior, more narrow trails are going to be the moms with a stroller and a kid on a Strider bike who's joining her. And we, as staff, are reluctant to suggest that we should be restricting bikes within those areas because we think it can be that it can be managed and that it really is necessary to provide a welcoming experience to those sorts of families with kids on bikes and that sort of thing. Southern Las Trampas Land Use Plan Amendment. This is a land use plan amendment and draft EIR that will be coming to the PAC this summer. We fully expect that this is a project that we will see litigation on. This is 756 acres of new parkland, primarily reusing existing ranch roads. So that's the base of our network. But we do have a couple sections that, see, I'm going to try to, if I can find my little tool here, might not be able to. I'm not sure if you can see my cursor or not, but there's a couple trails in here that you see the purple trails underlined with yellow. The Saber-Tooth Trail is a EVMA, a maintenance road that would be open to all users. As an alternative, we've included in here the Werbinger Loop Trail, which would be a narrow multi-use trail. So park users here would have the choice of staying on the wider trail or using the narrow trail. And then the Calaveras Ridge Trail here on the Peters Ranch property. This is a connector trail. So you have fire roads that are leading from the Freya Preserve. This is a development project. So people from their houses will be able to get onto trails that project's developing right to the edge of our property. So these are fire road access roads that go to the edge of our property, and then going across our property and then connecting to more fire roads and other pieces of property. So we need to make a connection there. And staff has determined that it would be appropriate to build a more narrow trail connection to minimize the habitat and the resource impacts there, and that can be accommodated. But we expect that there'll be concerns about that too.
And Brian, I just wanted to mention that this will all come before the PAC again, so don't feel like you have to absorb it all right now. Each of these projects will become before the PAC.
Yeah, thank you, Christina. And I'm taking the tact of telling everybody 3 times about these. So as these things will come back, I'm hoping that some of it will resonate. There's a lot of information here, and I know not everybody's, it's not going to stick right away, but again, just kind of flagging this because these are issues that are going to be coming forward to the PAC. And again, the Wildcat Flow Trail, another one that I know we're going to hear a lot about. This is a proposed purpose-built trail in existing parkland. In Wildcat Canyon. This was a request that came from local high school mountain bike teams to consider the opportunity to develop a downhill flow trail that removes downhill mountain bikes from a hiking trail. So possible for a situation that provides a safer hiking experience while providing for the downhill flow trail experience that the local high school mountain bike teams are interested in. This is not an approved project. We're still doing the initial resource studies necessary for us to even assess if it's a feasible project. We will be doing additional community engagement and environmental review, and we'll ultimately need to go to our board. But this is a proposal that's out there that we have been asked to look at the initial environmental effects of considering such a trail like this. So this is out there. If it's determined that it is feasible and something that we feel the board or the PAC may wish to consider to move forward, we'll be coming back to the PAC at some point. So those are 3 examples of some of the things that we're working on that that we know are going to generate a lot of interest amongst all of our trail users and stakeholders that we expect we'll have questions on. So our questions now are really, you know, as Christina mentioned earlier, we want to know what the PAC is hearing from your community regarding trails. Is there an interest in more trail access, or is there really an interest in more greater trail enforcement or whatnot? So, and then we're here, we know there's a lot of information to digest, and we would appreciate, you know, if there are specific and additional questions that the PAC has on this topic, staff stands as a resource to be able to provide that information for you. So with that, I will stop my share, and I'm sure there'll be lots of questions, and I know we have members of the public here. So thank you very much. Oh, Chair Obinger, I think you're on.
Yes, I was. I had something pop up on my screen and I couldn't get rid of it or the mute, but I'm back in business. Thank you very much for the presentation. And I see lots of hands. So let's go ahead and take our clarifying questions from the PAC. I'll start with Annie Burke.
Great, thank you. And thank you so much, Brian and Christina, for that overview. It's such a complex topic, and I feel, well, I spend a lot of time in my work space thinking about this kind of stuff, and that I learned a lot, actually. So thank you for sharing what you shared. In my non-PAC hat, I work for Together Bay Area, which is a regional coalition of lots of different kinds of organizations, including county parks departments and open space districts. And I just want to share that a lot of what has been described today and what I've heard on previous PAC meetings is very common and familiar throughout the region. This is not a East Bay Parks only situation or arrangement, and that each park district, parks department, open space district handles it differently because of the different communities, because of different arrangements, topographies, geographies, populations. And so one of the challenges in front of us is, how does East Bay Parks want to work on this, and who does East Bay Parks want to be? But I just want to, I guess, normalize that this is the complexities of trails and trail usage is a very common issue. And that also there's a lot of coordination happening around the region on this work. East Bay Park staff, I know, have traveled to other park districts to learn from them, and other park districts are coming to East Bay Parks to learn about how they're working on it. So there's a lot of relationship building, information sharing, coordination that's happening across the region. And I guess I want to share that in that we're not an island in this park district, and we're part of a region, and the staff are very aware of that. I have 2 observations / questions for staff. And this is kind of taking off my Together Bay Area hat and putting on my PAC hat. One is something I thought about a lot after the last meeting, which I've heard less of today in your presentation, Brian, but is binary thinking and thinking about good trails, bad trails, black and white, just the us, them. And really, I think it's really important for us to think in a much more multi-benefit, multi-dimensional, multicultural perspective. And I hope that as we move forward, we can continue what I heard today from you, Brian, in thinking in that multiplicity, and that the ways of parks and land conservation in the 20th century of, that this is a good project or a bad project, or something is saved or not saved, doesn't serve us anymore. And we really need to move beyond that. And then the question I have, which doesn't need to be answered now, but is around power and authority. What's not clear to me is who has power, who has the authority to make decisions on this. It seems sometimes like some very vocal community members have a lot of power, but I'm not sure who has the authority. And I hope that that's something that we can clarify as things come to the PAC, and as we as a park district, all of the different parts of it, put together plans for trails that we're clear about where the input is, who has decision-making authority, and that we're really taking into account communities who have more or less power than other communities. That difference between power and authority just seems something that we should be very clear about. And I'll stop. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Annie. Next, I see Neil Tsutsui.
Great, thank you. Thanks so much, Brian, for that presentation. That was really informative, and I think it was really educational for me, as Annie said as well. It's an interesting and complex landscape, literally and figuratively. My question is, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about sort of lessons learned or the experience from Crockett Hills, because that seems like in some ways a bit of a pilot experience, and also probably kind of an extreme scenario, because there is such high usage there in a small amount of space. And I think if we were to see a little bit of friction or rough spots, they might appear there and give us some direction on how to go forward in other locations.
Yeah, I will take a stab at that. I will note we also have Sean Dugan here, who's our Trails Program Manager, who's also been involved in that, and both he and I were here, but not in the lead as the Crockett Hills trails were developed. And at the time, Crockett Hills was what I would say was relatively lesser used park, and there were the Crockett Hills Land Use Plan had identified a trail network through there, and then there was an assessment done by our stewardship staff and others that the habitat sensitivity at Crockett Hills was perhaps a little bit less than some of our other parks in terms of creek crossings and other things. So decision was made that we could build such a trail there, and we could do it in a way that was perhaps a little bit different than our past trail experience. I know others, some who are in this meeting, and other stakeholders who have a lot of concerns about how that process went down. So I don't want to take away from that. I think there's probably legitimate comments about how the trails were developed and around the transparency there. But I think the staff at the time felt that it had been fully approved and had been evaluated by staff and had moved forward. Fast forward to today, what we're seeing is a park that is well used and embraced, and frankly, quite well adopted by the trail users. In fact, just this weekend, the Bicycle Trails Council of the East Bay held a big trail maintenance event out there where they had youth and a number of others going out there and cleaning up the trail after the winter. So if you're familiar, our cows can do a lot of damage to trails in wet weather. So they've been going out there and they've been cleaning up the trail to make it to make a smooth surface. I've heard anecdotally from some of our equestrian users that that they've abandoned the park because of mountain bike use there. I'm not sure that we saw a lot of equestrian use there previously. So I don't have data on that. But I do know that the park now is very popular with hikers and with mountain bikers, particularly the couple flow trails there. So, and like I say, they've really adopted the site, and I think it's been an example of a proof of concept to some degree, where folks have come to us and say, "This is great. We would like to see a couple more of these elsewhere."
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Whoops. Okay, I thought I was on mute. Thank you very much. Next, I have Irene.
Hi, thanks for the presentation. And I remember when the working group was put together, the main reason for that really was because there was a huge discussion on user group conflicts. And that's when the board decided to set up this working group to find out where these groups could find common ground and where there were disagreements. And it looks like through the 1.5-year process, it kind of expanded to more issues, which is great because in some ways we learned how much all the user groups have shared values. You guys covered all kinds of things like signage, surveys. You list a whole thing. And so when it was coming before the PAC, what we decided that our role would be to focus on the issues in which there was no consensus, so that maybe we could help provide feedback to the board on the parts that the user group could not come together on. And so I read with interest the huge report that was put together, which was very beautiful, by the way, and very comprehensive. And I see that on page 3, that it really comes down to one issue that stood out that there was no consensus on. It says, ultimately, the disagreement which the working group could not come to consensus on was the presence of bicycles on natural surface trails, not ranch or fire roads. Which I don't think that particular sentence is clear enough, because I'm not sure unless I am missing something. But I thought that the lack of consensus was not simply about the natural surface trails, but rather about narrow multi-use natural surface trails. That's where there was no consensus. Because reading all the comments, it seemed like there was a lot of consensus over bicycles on natural surface trails. It was just when there was going to be a user conflict, when there was too many people, because right now multi-use trails are on 8-foot wide or more or bigger trails. And the conflict is when you have narrow trails where you're trying to get bikes and horses and hikers all together. And that's what the whole, it sounds like that is what the PAC will be working on, is this particular issue, that we don't need to revisit everything that was just spent a 1.5 years on. Am I correct?
I would say that is largely a fair statement, and thank you, Irene, for reading our report. I appreciate that very much. I would say that by and large, that's a fair statement. We did hear across the board generally support for single-use trails. Like, yes, if bikes want to use the trails, let's build some trails where just the bikers can have So that is something, like I say, with the Wildcat Flow Trail that we want to consider, although we've already heard concerns about that. And so I think that's part of the question. I think we have also, and Annie mentioned, we have met with Santa Clara County, we've met with Marin County, we've met with other counties where, their experiences have been that, they can accommodate multi-use. So I think that's part of the discussion is sort of, are there places that, we can accommodate multi-use? And I think part of what we've seen as staff is that in terms of trail conflict or perceived trail conflict, where most of that happens is relatively close to the trailhead, right? Where you have most people converging. And then as people get farther out, they disperse and they spread out, and you don't necessarily see the issues as much. The challenge is that from when we're planning these multi-use trails and we're just looking at maps and we're not necessarily in the field and we're not able to deal with the reality out there, is there's often a very strong reaction to what's proposed on the maps that seems to prohibit our moving forward with multi-use trails. So I think that's part of what we're trying to kind of work through there. So I think you're correct that there was support for single-use trails, and if that's the direction that the PAC wants to recommend that the board consider, I know we've heard from some of our board members their interest in looking at that. But I think, yes, a lot of the conflict, a lot of the tension is around multi-use trails.
So the reason why I asked, because I think it's really important for us as PAC members to understand our mission here. This is really about narrow trails, having multiple users on narrow trails. That is where there was a lack of consensus. And probably the disturbing part of all that was there are these plans being put together that actually are making narrow multi-use trails. So it becomes at the forefront. And I think that is really what I'm hoping our future meetings really discuss. That we don't veer off into other arenas that have already been beaten to death by the working group. I don't think that is our purpose here, that hopefully we can be of assistance to the board from this point forward to where there's no consensus. Thank you
for that feedback, Irene. Next, we've got Roland.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. This is I think everybody has said this is a really important topic. Thank you, Brian and Christina. I'm also thankful for my knowledgeable PAC members and Annie, Neil, and Irene already who have gone through. I haven't read that whole report, so I'm just going to put that out there right now. But I think some of my questions got answered. So it sounds like we have a lot of data about park use by all users and understanding. And there was an interesting comment made about equestrians kind of abandoning the park, and I hope that we're keeping that in mind as we are making decisions about trails and how we're trying to. It seemed like there was a hyper focus on mountain bikers, which is an important growing part, but also is there also an effect to other park users and making sure that we're keeping that as part of the conversation. There was a discussion about a high school asking about the construction of a flow trail. And then there also seemed to be some discussion about trails perhaps being constructed for mountain bike use only. And is that precedent setting? Have we ever built trails for specific users in the past? And kind of almost going back to the high school request for the flow trail, that seems like a hyper specific use that the park district would have to use its resources to build a trail for a very narrow user group. And I just would want to be understanding how do we do that in terms of the funds that we have, or are others going to participate in that financially? Yeah, I'll stop there.
So I'll answer your second question first. So I think the Wildcat Flow Trail, while it generated through some of the high school mountain bike groups, it wouldn't be a specific facility that would only be used by high school groups. It's actually the type of facility that most mountain bikers want to use. So I think it would be serving a pretty significant user group in our community. That's high school mountain bike groups, families. My kids love riding those types of flow trails. So I think it would be a pretty attractive type of facility if it's something that we deemed appropriate to move forward with. But your first question about if that would be precedent setting, it would be largely. We did build the trails at Crockett Hills to be mountain bike optimized, and that they would be sort of provide a fun experience for mountain bikers, and that's what we've seen, who primarily use it and use it well. And we don't see as much use from equestrians and hikers there, which is probably a good thing because of the potential for trail conflict. So it is a little bit of a self-selecting type of facility. So that it would be somewhat precedent setting, but that's I've also seen that's where a number of these facilities have been built throughout the state. It does seem to be where some of the interest in the sport is going as well. Whereas these types of flow trail sort of facilities that separate the users.
I'm sorry, can I ask one follow-up question then?
Absolutely.
On flow trails, that seems to me that you would be exceeding the 15 miles per hour. No?
I'll let Sean respond, but you can design it certainly where you wouldn't.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Sean Dugan, Trails Program Manager. I will answer that by saying that if you can, the idea with the flow trail is that it has enough grade reversal in it, so sort of changes in grade and direction within the trail that actually prevents you from having a long straight downhill with open sight lines like on many of our fire roads. So if it's designed correctly, it actually, with features even additional to just the grade and the flow of it, that could provide passing room or turnouts or obstacles that force the user to slow down, as Brian was showing in his slideshow. So really, we actually can look at. Sometimes I think you can see average speed as well, and so you can kind of get an idea for what's going on. I will say this: that we don't have, we have hiker only trails at the Park District, and then building a trail specifically for mountain bikes, as Brian said, would be a new thing for the Park District. But we also don't have any horse only trails, and so as part of this exploration and pilots and moving forward, we really want to think about that as well, because hikers and horses tend to get along well, better than bikes and horses, but there is the dog issue, and so so we want to look at that as well, and not just simply just focus on the single-use bike trails, but single-use trails in general is something that we really want to explore.
Okay. Thank you very much. Next up, we have Susie Claxton. And Susie, you're still on mute. And you're still muted, unfortunately.
Got it now, got it now. When I unclicked my hand, I moved out of the line and I couldn't find myself. Thank you, sorry. Just thank you to Brian. And since I feel like I'm still pretty new to the pack and new to this issue, I appreciate the fact that you said that we're going to get several repetitions of this discussion because it's starting to sink in this time. So thank you very much. And I haven't read the 180-page report, so I appreciate the fact that Irene has and maybe some others have. So one question I have is about the resources and being able to study this information. Is there a place we can look at your slides other than looking at the whole, YouTube of this program? Or the last
well,
program?
I can certainly provide a copy of my slides. There's also a lot of information on our Trail User Working Group webpage. And at this point, it's probably too much information on there just because there's been so much that have come in. But one thing that I am working with our staff on is developing kind of a story map that tries to present all this information in a sort of digestible format. So I'm hoping to get that to you soon, so you can start to see some of that. That'll have some links to what we're working on, some of the things we're talking about, can direct you to things like the California State Parks trail manual, or to other agencies that are doing things, so you can see what's happening out elsewhere in the trail universe. So I hope to get that to you soon, but certainly can provide you a copy of the slides.
Okay, well, thank you. I mean, others might want to look at them too. So if there's just a place, maybe along with the trail user information, and because you are doing a really good job of, segmenting out the issues. And so I really appreciate that, rather than reading every line in the report and, but I will try to read that report. But I do also want to say that I think that, it's interesting that this is becoming a more of a sport, a team sport for high school youth. I think in the future, people of that age group are going to be hopefully using more and more bicycles for commuting, and using other forms of commuting, like biking to the BART or to the train to get back and forth to work. People my age, we grew up with cars. We use cars. I personally was able to use a bus provided by Stanford University in the second half of my time at Stanford University. It was really, really nice to be able to use that, because I didn't believe in using my car every day. But I think it's important that we recognize that youth are taking up bikes. So, I mean, bikes were popular when I was a kid, but then when I became a worker bee, I was using my car. So anyway, it's a good thing to think about the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Susie. Next, we've got Igor.
Well, thank you for this opportunity, and I must second the vote of appreciation for the quality and the attractiveness of the report. I'm working my way through it. I'm about 2/3 of the way through as we speak. A lot of the questions that I had have already been covered, so that's a good thing. I have a number that I would like to just get surfaced here. What I understand is that we have hiker-only trails, and then now we have evidently a biker-only trail. When you have these kinds of trails, do you make an effort to allow other kinds of users access to the same general areas in the park? Or say, for instance, if you had a biker-only trail, would there be a hiker-only trail somewhere in that would experience the same sense of the park that would be there? Another one was some of the discussions I've had with various folks, including the folks at the gathering at the Brazilian room. Question was raised: is it, well, if you make biker-only trails, are the bikers going to want to travel to there, or would they just still be using the multi-use trails, and that wouldn't happen? I've heard from a number of bikers that they would clearly travel to a biker trail as a destination, and that they would definitely want to take advantage of it. And the other two things are basically are just questions. What I'd like to just to get a sense of where you're headed with this is one of them has to do what's to be done about e-bikes. How are they going to be treated in this whole mixture of uses? And what kind of programs or efforts or directions are we engaged in to improve the diversity of the users in the park, including, of course, those who use bikes and, well, those who use the trails, I guess is really what I'm asking. Thank you for that.
So your first question about biker-only trails, and one thing I do want to emphasize is we haven't created a biker-only trail. Right now, it's only a proposal. And what the proposal would actually do is there's currently a trail there that's used by hikers, bikers, and equestrians. And that opportunity would remain. So there would still be the hiker trail. You would just be removing bikes from it. So we're not proposing that we designate any of our parks as bike-only parks. You know, we'd be expected that that there would be in any of our parks that there would be hiking facilities, but you might be able to provide a single or multiple, you know, bike-only trails within that park that are part of that network. So we don't want to take away any opportunities from anybody. We're not looking to take away any hiking or equestrian opportunities. It's just if we can provide some of those more focused cycling opportunities, I guess, is part of the question. Question on e-bikes, you know, we've intentionally not gotten into that in that discussion because that's just a big conversation, but I know that's something that the board and others are very interested in engaging on. So I would say stay tuned on that.
I guess I'm concerned with if we ignore that, it's at our peril, that may be if we don't cover it, something's gonna happen and it may not be what we want.
Brian, if I could jump in on that. Yes, Igor, we agree because e-bikes are here and they're everywhere. So one of the questions that staff is grappling with that I'd ask the PAC to just give some thought to as well is how different is the e-bike issue from just the bike issue? So if we're talking about natural surface trails, setting aside paved trails for a minute, but if we're talking about having bikes in our parks, how different is it really to have a bike versus an e-bike? If it's about speed limits, our chief of police is here. You will hear him say all the time, behavior over batteries. Thank you, Chief Chabara. I love that. And so it's getting harder and harder to tell the difference between an e-bike and a regular bike. And so just something to think about, is it really about e-bikes or is it just about bikes in our parks on natural surface trails, and what are the differences there? So no answers to that, but just food for thought for the PAC to think about, and we will have to take up the question of e-bikes sooner rather than later.
Oh, and it does also get to your next question, which is sort of diversity on our trails. We have continually heard increasingly from senior citizens and older people who are interested in using e-bikes in our parks. They get to an age where they've got bad knees or whatever, and they found that, you know, climbing up the hills or something like that, they want to be able to use an e-bike. And we've heard increasingly from folks like that who are coming forward. And I just say, you know, in terms of in terms of what sorts of programs we're doing to increase diversity in our parks is a whole separate conversation. I think, you know, in general, that's a part of the heart of this discussion, though, is just recognizing that we want to have an inclusive park district in general, a park district that's, you know, welcoming to all users, and, you know, one that, you know, doesn't necessarily rely on exclusion and enforcement and regulation, but something that, you know, that we're trying to provide a safe and welcoming experiences to all users. So you know, I know I've Rich City Rides in Richmond is a great organization that has they've built a full bicycle pump track within their city. They're working on getting a lot of youth on bikes within their city, and I know I've had some conversations with them that, you know, they would love to have some of these facilities too. So I think you know, it would serve all of our users if we were to find some opportunities for this. I think the Oyster Bay Bike Skills Park would be an incredibly popular facility to the East Oakland and San Leandro community. for
Yeah, I was just reflecting from this weekend's experience. I went to the Miller Knox multi-ethnic walk that was happening there, and there was a number of folks there who had never been there or never been much in the way of anywhere. And they were very grateful when they were pointed out where Mount Tamalpais was, also identifies the birds on the seashore. And it was just very heartwarming to see that little light go on with folks who haven't previously experienced that. And so I was hoping that we would continue to foster that sort of a goal to grow that aspect of the trails.
I concur.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Michelle Lacey.
Great. Thanks, Carlin. Thank you, Brian and Christina, for the thoughtful presentation. I really appreciated just kind of understanding the difference between the trails, and then, understanding this, single use, the dirt tracks that aren't the fire roads. And so I appreciated that. So from my understanding from that presentation, it looks like staff is looking at planning future trails with all uses in mind, and making and we're looking at potential design changes and things, and taking those things into account as we may be looking at new trails. Is that correct, Brian?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. When we go into approaching trails, we're going in with a multi-use trail perspective, and it may be that that's not possible, or there may be certain parks where there's an opportunity to do something more specifically. But in general, I mean, we've got a lot on our plates, so we're just trying to open up lands and provide access. And so our first flush is, how can we do this to provide as much access to as many people as possible? So that's multi-use.
And I appreciate that. And I think, being in recreation and dealing with, first of all, we're seeing a huge demand. Our community wants a pump track. And so we are seeing our community raise money for one, because we don't have funds for that right now. We're right next to Briones. I hear all the time that people want more access in Briones. And this kind of reminds me of anytime we have an emerging sport or an emerging activity, we hear a lot from those who traditionally haven't had access, that their access is going to be lost by opening it up. And I appreciate staff being clear that, we really want to provide more access to everybody, and we're not taking away access from anybody. And my comment to that as well is that, I think expanding more use across the district is going to see less conflict, because more people are going to be spread out and not going to one particular, a couple of particular parks where everyone goes to now. So I think that is a good strategy, and someplace that I would like to see us get. It just kind of reminds me a lot of, tennis versus pickleball. And so, we have tennis courts that now have pickleball on them, and the pickleball players want to play, but the tennis players are all mad. So, it seems like it's a big deal to everybody, because everyone is passionate about it. But this is kind of what you do as park planners and recreation people, is you make plans, and that you can design things to make it so that it's the best it can be for everybody. And I appreciate that. So that was pretty much, I think all kids and adults need a safe place to ride. And it's increasingly not safe on our roads for them. And so I think having some places outside in the trail, getting them out so that they can appreciate that, and then hopefully we'll be stewards in the future, I think is huge. So I want to thank you for all your hard work on that, but that's where I'm at.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Next up, I have Bob Simmons.
Okay, thank you, Carlin, and thank you, Christina and Brian, for your presentation. I want to second the comments. Somebody said, would you please put the slideshow on the website or send it out to us? It really had information I hadn't seen before, and I appreciate that. I also will ask if you would consider figuring out a way to incorporate trail etiquette in how you talk about this, and I didn't really hear that. And I have a specific example in mind. And for me, trail etiquette is not just about who yields to whom in what situation, but it's about, and I'll use my hiking club as an example. We can have 30 people on a trail hiking a single track trail, and there's 5 bikes that come along. We step aside, we say hello, they say hello, we say have a good day, they say have a good day. And that to me is how we make this thing work more than any other thing. And I just hope that going forward, you'll incorporate that in your presentations. Now I have one more thing I wish to say is I've hiked Crockett Hills about 10 times. I love the Sugar City Trail, which is the flow trail you mentioned. And I hike up it, and it's a very safe trail to hike up. I don't think I'd hike down it. And I really appreciate the fact that it was built as a flow trail, it's built for bikes, but it's also available for people who hike because it's actually a much nicer trail, much nicer way to hike up. So these are comments, not questions, but one question, I'm sorry. Christina, I think if you could restate at the end what you want from the pack, that would be helpful. Irene is absolutely correct as to what the report says, but I think I heard something a little bit different from you in terms of what you want. And I think we really need clarity in what the Park District and the board wants from the pack. Thank you.
I'm sorry, who was going to answer that question?
Sorry, he had said at the end, so I was going to wait till the end, but I'm happy to address it now. If you'd like, I'll give you my thoughts now, and then we can circle back at the end if needed. To Irene's point, Irene is correct that the issue that the Trail User Working Group identified as the core issue that working group didn't have consensus about was bikes on natural surface trails that are not ranch roads or fire roads. The sentence I read on page 3, that's what I read, which I think it practically means narrow trails. It's natural surface trails that are not ranch roads, and which means that they're less than 8 foot wide. So it's about bikes on trails. I would say that beyond that, the kinds of comments that we're hearing tonight is exactly what staff is hoping for from the board, and that will be helpful to the board. What are you hearing from things like everybody just wants more access? People are concerned about communities that haven't traditionally used our parks. How do we increase diversity in our parks and make sure that everybody feels welcome? And more access for everybody will, I think, help to address that. So what are you hearing from your communities about trails in general? Are there not enough trails? Are the trails too busy? Do we need different kinds of trails? Do people want separated trails? Just whatever you're hearing and seeing out there is sort of the pulse of your community around trails in our regional parks. So that's what I have. And as we continue forward with more dialogue, I think that will continue to get refined.
Thank you. And I didn't mean to put you on the spot, Christina. I appreciate your response. I thought, as I was looking at the list of hands, that those were all of the PAC members who had questions, and so that was an appropriate time. However, I do see that Rochelle has her hand up as well. So Rochelle, if you'd like to unmute and make your comments or your questions before we go to public comment.
Yeah, thank you. And I'd like to add my thanks to everyone else's for the presentation. I do have a question, and this goes to Brian Holt. You made a comment that the hiker/equestrian trail community and the bicycle trail community. Oh no. Am I still on?
Still on.
You are, yes.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, good. That both of those communities were liked the idea of having their own trails, but that's not a realistic solution because of habitat constraints. Did I understand that comment correctly?
In short, yes, I would say,
Okay.
we've heard from many folks that everybody would like their own trail. And sort of the easy solution has been just, well, build parallel mountain bike trails or others. And we do work in a very constrained, constrained parks, constrained by habitat, constrained by conservation easements and other restrictions that limits us from being able to do that. And sometimes, most of the time, it's physically just not possible. Topography doesn't lend itself to doing that. So that's.
And Brian, if I add to that.
No,
sorry,
I'm still, what?
Sorry, Rochelle, this is Christina. I just wanted to add to that response a little bit to say, it doesn't mean never. In some places, that will be a good solution. But it's just one of the tools in the toolbox, and giving each user group their own separate trail in every case can't be the whole solution. For the reasons that Brian said.
Yeah, I hear that. I guess that it feels a little bit counterintuitive to me in light of a couple of things that you've laid out. One being simply the what seems to me an extraordinarily small amount of trail building that has occurred in the last quarter century, that we simply have not been adding trails. So it seems odd that we would be bumping up hard against habitat constraints on a system-wide basis. I can see that it could be an issue in any particular spot, but it seems as though, given the increase in population and the increase in the land base, that we have a lot of trail building to do to serve the public that expects to have access to these lands. And the other is that it seems to me that two narrow trails might well have less habitat impact than one big trail, at least in some situations. And if we're going to be inviting all of the uses, and they're all going to be on there, then you ultimately have to have a trail wide enough for all of them. You might actually need more trail space to create a multiple use trail than the two narrow trails added together. And the separation of the trails, it seems to me, would offer some opportunities for building in a way that respects the actual on-the-ground habitat configurations. So I just wanted to throw those considerations out there. I realize it would not be the solution in every case, but it certainly seems like it's not a solution that should be brushed off the table as impractical. It seems like something that needs to be looked at more, to me. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd just say I think all solutions are on the table. I didn't mean to suggest that that was impractical in every situation. I just more meant to convey that there are no easy answers. But where there may point well taken, very good comments. I appreciate those, Rochelle.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm just going to do one more quick check, and I do know there's a few PAC members who have
on-the-ground habitat.
I'm sorry, was someone speaking? So all I was trying to say is I'm doing a last check to see if there's any PAC members who have final comments. I do want to acknowledge, I know a few people have messaged me and said they're going to have to leave early because this is a longer meeting. So, if you have to leave, it's understood. So I don't see any other PAC members with hands raised. So we will now go to the public comment. And I do
suggest
see.
that was impractical.
Okay, I'm not sure who that is, but we're going to start first with Joseph Sutton. Joseph, if you'd like to make your public comment, please.
Hi, my name is Josephine Sutton, and I go to Martin Luther King Middle School. I'm a member of the Wildcat Composite mountain biking team. I am 13 years old. I was drawn to mountain biking because I love exercising and being outside. I have ridden at Crockett and the Flow Trail a bunch of times, and I love it there. I'm hoping we can make a flow trail like that in Tilden. 3 times a week, I ride in Tilden. Tilden has become very crowded. Sometimes the hikers get mad at us, even though we are following the rules. I think that mountain bikers should have access to single tracks trails. Therefore, we should build some more single track because there's only 2.5 miles of single track as of now in Tilden. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Josephine, and I apologize. It said Joseph Sutton, so I apologize that I misstated your name. Next, we have Tim Murphy.
Hello, my name is Aiden Murphy. Tim Murphy is my dad. And I'm a junior at Berkeley High School and a varsity athlete on the Berkeley High mountain biking team. As a rider who rides in the parks 3 to 5 times a week, mostly Tilden and Sibley, the lack of trail diversity is by far my largest complaint with the East Bay Regional Parks District, specifically the lack of narrow single track trails for mountain bikers and trails specifically tailored to mountain bikers. I've traveled to ride and race at many trail networks that recognize the large and ever increasing population of mountain bikers and that have implemented trails tailored to mountain bikers and have many single track mountain biking trails. These trail systems are fun, challenging, and provide an excellent connection with nature. Moreover, many of these trails are safe for all user groups as they separate trails for riders and hikers so that both groups can enjoy trails at their own pace. And lastly, this is more specific to our community, but with the explosion in bike jackings that we've seen, these trails would provide let me restate that. With the explosion in bike jackings we've seen, and for some trails we have to ride on the road to get to them, this creates a unsafe environment for riders to be in. I'm constantly worried that when riding on the road to get to the trail that my bike will be taken from me. I hope the board recognizes that what they are providing for mountain bikers is insufficient, and I hope to see more single track trails for mountain bikers in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Frank Wong.
Hello. Yeah, thank you for taking my comment. I'm Frank Wong. I'm one of the parent coaches on the Wildcat Composite team on the East Bay. And yeah, I just want to say thank you, Brian and Christina, for your report and analysis. The work you guys are doing is super valuable, very important to the community, very important to the kids. And the massive growth of mountain biking is encouraging. Kids want to be outside, getting exercise and enjoying nature. Should definitely be supported. This activity benefits their physical and mental well-being. And to second Susie's comment from before, the habit of getting on a bike they develop is exactly what we want more of as they become adults in order to fight climate change. Therefore, more trails that kids can ride to from their homes are exactly what our community needs. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Joel Schrock.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen of the pack. I'm Joel Schrock, the advocacy lead for Bay Area mountain bikers called Bambi. We're approaching 10,000 members now. Christina, thank you so much for your opening comments. It sounds like you're trying to bring in a little sanity and objectivity into the conversation here, which is so refreshing. I also want to thank Brian Holt for his presentation today and for the outcome of the Trail User Working Group at the last meeting, where they basically summarized the group found the biggest challenge facing the park is access to nail trails for mountain bikes. So here we are with the task of finally solving this long-running inequity that's gone on for decades. I'd like to address a couple of the comments that highlight the dug-in position and distortions used by the persistent anti-bike folks that keep popping up that commented after his presentation last month. One commenter suggested that the number of tickets given out to cyclists was low based on their overall visits, because apparently they think that every cyclist that visit the parks need to be ticketed. I mean, these are public lands and cycling in them is not illegal, and increased enforcement really isn't the answer. Equitable access is. Another commenter said that 90% of the trail users are hikers, so there's no reason to allow better access to cyclists. However, they seem to have forgotten that riding bikes on trails remains largely illegal in our parks, which is why bikes have low numbers, where it's illegal to ride them on trails. And a horse association speaker blamed mountain bikes for the reduction in equestrians using the park. And this position is just not being cognizant of the changing times of our modern urban society. Equestrian numbers have been dropping for decades. Another person mentioned that the Trail User Working Group poll showed 60% said no to bikes on narrow trails. And this isn't majority rule. That they conveniently left out was 40%, 43%, nearly half were open to it. There's plenty of space for diverse activities in our parks that span 125,000 acres. It's more like an ice cream case than an elected office. Just because 63% vote for strawberry ice cream, it doesn't mean that everyone has to eat strawberry ice cream. If 43% of park users want chocolate fudge brownie, that should be an option, along with different flavors for other tastes. In the spirit of embracing our diverse community and supporting access to our parks overall, what these folks should be supporting are bike-specific trails that flow downhill, just as I mentioned the first time I spoke to this group. Bikes travel slowly while they pedal uphill on the existing multi-use fire roads, and they're fine for that. When bikes travel downhill, they can travel at faster speeds. When this happens, if they're on a bike-specific downhill trail, it'll be the benefit for all park users. Whether they're equestrians, hikers, or dog walkers, if they worry about bikes traveling faster than they are, they too should support bike-specific trails because it produces the outcome they desire. Adoption and opening of existing community bike trails have a number of benefits to all park users as well. They direct traffic away from existing hiking or equestrian trails. They're already built and have been ridden for decades in some cases. Essentially, all of them go downhill, which separates cyclists from other users when they travel faster. And adoption of these trails will also curtail unauthorized trail building. I'm asking you to press the board to finally address this long-running inequity by moving quickly on developing purpose-built bike trails, as well as adopting some of the community bike trails for a resolution that can be done quickly, at low cost, and with negligible environmental impact, because these trails have existed and been in use for many years. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I do just, everyone's been great about keeping with the time. But since, our meeting is running very long, we want to make sure that the public has the opportunity to provide feedback, but please don't be offended. We're going to cut you off after 3 minutes so we can hear everyone and be respectful of time. So I didn't say that before. I apologize, but I thank everyone for staying within your time limit thus far. Next, we have Kelly Abreu.
All right, thank you. People express reservations about building trails for a specific use, but they haven't any reservations about banning bikes from 75% of the trails, which is a specific class of user. The importance of narrow trails as a separate class of trails, is not really recognized by the Park District even today, because I don't see an inventory of narrow trails in the 140-page report. If we're going to be talking about narrow trails, I don't even see what we're talking about. Where's the map of all the narrow trails? Where's the mileage? I don't see it. People talk about this power versus authority. Well, there's an imperialist autocratic outlook here at the Park District that tends to ignore the voice of park visitors. The district does surveys and polling to measure voter acceptance of bond measures. But visitors are more often viewed through the lens of law enforcement as opposed to asking what are the public needs, what is the customer demand, and what is the market size, and shifting because the market is always changing. Nobody cares about that. You know, you wait until people are banging down the doors and until there's demonstrations at Pleasanton Ridge. So it sounds like, you know, like 20 years ago or something, we started out with around 70,000 acres. Then you added 55,000 acres. Now, when you had 70,000 acres, you had 1,200 miles of trails. And when you added another 55,000 acres, you added 13 miles of new trails. It seems like the Park District used to have this ethic of operating legal trails, and now you've given that up. You know, it dropped your trail intensity of trail generation intensity dropped by a factor of 80 during that time. The popularity of Crockett Hills, that demonstrates that there is a high demand of bike trails. That golf course that everybody visited, I bet you they had tons and tons of little trails around everywhere. I've been to golf courses. People ride around on carts, and those trails are built by the private owner. I bet you that there's going to be fewer trails when it turns into a park, because the Park District doesn't care about golf carts or bikes or anything. It seems to minimize the trails. And one last point, the natural surface trails, gravel is not a natural surface. And from my experience on bikes, gravel is not a suitable surface for bikes. So people, you know, you point to a road, you say that's a road, it's a multi-purpose. And when you put gravel on it, especially when it gets steep, it's way too slippery for bikes. I've seen people fall off and scrape their elbows on that gravel. Thanks.
Thank you. Next, I see it just says iPhone. I'm not sure. That's the only one I'm looking at on the screen that says iPhone.
Excellent. This is William Uregi. William Uregi with the Sierra Club, also Mission Peak Conservancy. What I've heard is very interesting. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. We can.
Okay. I apologize. What I've heard is very interesting. I heard one speaker say, and this was a PAC member, she said, provide as much access as possible for as many people as possible. And she said that she saw a lot of need at Briones. You know, the concern I have is that the park's mission statement says that it has an environmental ethic that guides the district and all of its activities. And that means that you actually have to protect not only habitat, but the species within that habitat. When you're building trails across that habitat, it's very difficult to protect the species. You know, a bicycle picking up seeds in one area, dropping them off in another, that's basically polluting the environment. You can transport thistle from one area of the park to another very quickly, whether on foot or on a bike, but increasing the trails in a park actually fragments habitat. It basically creates areas that animals have difficulty traversing. And if they do traverse it, they can get killed or run over. So my concern is that building a bunch of trails in the parks, whether it's for bikes or equestrians or for humans, you're basically fragmenting habitat. I think the district needs to protect the habitat itself for all species, not just mountain bikers, not just walkers, not just equestrians. The other issue is trails. What I heard is that I was talking to a district board member earlier today, and he was stating that 30 to 40% of the bike usage in the parks is e-bikes. That's what he sees. And so, you know, the biggest issue, according to the mountain bike advocate a few minutes ago, that facing the park district was bike access. But no, the biggest issue facing the park district is climate change. I mean, the last board meeting, we had a discussion about trees dying and the need to remove them from the parks. The mountain bike issue is a small issue. Trail access, that's a big issue. We need to figure out how to provide habitat protection across the park for all species, and we need to do it in a way that minimizes the damage to the environment. So that's my point. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next, we have Nico Dittmar.
Hi. So my name is Nico Dimore, and I'm a junior at Bishop Adad High School, and I'm a part of my school's mountain bike team. And I'm here to speak about high school mountain biking in the East Bay Regional Parks and the importance of increased trail access and building mountain bike specific single track trails. So like as Brian pointed out in his presentation, high school mountain biking is a fastly growing sport. NICA, the organization that I'm a part of, is in over like 26 states and has over, I think, 20,000 cyclists. And in fact, in California, high school mountain biking has grown so big that California League has been split in half, NorCal and SoCal. And for the mountain bike team at my school, we've gone from 3 racers last year to around 7 this year. So I think overall, mountain biking is a fastly growing sport, and there's plenty of kids from all over the Bay Area and from all sorts of different schools to do it. And for example, I think like Berkeley High is like 100 bikers. And there's a very wide range of people who do high school mountain biking, many of which don't fit the mold of typical athletes from other sports. Mountain biking serves as an important way for me and many other people to have a healthy outdoor recreation. And, many of these kids that have been underserved through other sport programs need access to trails to participate. And, East Bay regional parks such as Chabot, Redwood, and Tilden and more are really the only places that we can practice in the East Bay. And we hope that the parks that our community financially supports will support us with the trail access we need to practice. And, considerable effort and resources are spent on the creation and upkeep of baseball, soccer, and football fields. And I feel like that our cycling community needs trail access so we can participate in our sport. And as like someone else pointed out, I think there's only like 3 miles of single track in Tilden, which is nothing. And our regional parks with their large amount of land, I think is our natural choice for the access we need. So I think it's also important to note that we don't race in East Bay Regional Parks. These parks are just places where we practice. And something about East Bay Regional Parks is that most of these trails are multi-use far roads. The thing about that is that the places that we actually race as part of our race league are mostly single track trails. And it's important that we train on places that are more similar to our race courses. By building trails that are more single track, we'll allow hundreds of high school mountain bikers to get better training, which is closer to the actual race conditions. This can prevent crashes and injuries from inadequate training. And another thing that's been mentioned by many other people is that by building trails that are single track that go downhill, we will allow, by building single track trails and mountain bike specific trails, we are benefiting all trail users. Building trails that flow downhill allow cyclists to travel downhill separate from other trail users. This creates a separation between bikers and other trail users, which results in less passing at higher speeds and less user conflicts. So overall, high school mountain biking is a fastly growing sport, and East Bay Regional Park serves as an important training ground for hundreds of cyclists all over the East Bay. Building more single track trails and trails that are mountain bike specific will make the park experience better for all users. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I just want to say I really appreciate all of the input from the young people that are taking the time to participate in our meeting tonight. So thank you. Tanya Henderson is next.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to dial in quickly. Thank you for having me join in. I just had a whole speech planned, but a lot of that was scrapped due to Brian's presentation, which was fantastic. So thank you so much. But I did want to dial in and just comment too on trail users and what it looks like. My name's Tanya. I've been a 20 plus year resident of the East Bay and, a hiker, a trail user, and most recently a mountain biker as well. And I do want to comment on the access of trails within the East Bay parks. There is definitely an opportunity, I would believe, to open that access more. My home trails are in the Pleasanton area, so we're very restricted to the fire roads, and there's ample opportunity and trails to access more trails for bike users up there that already exist. So it's not even as much of a comment as opening additional trails or new trails, but redesignating trails that are already there to provide use to trail to mountain bikers as well. So I want to give some consideration and some thought to that. I've done some research, and there has been asks for those type of trails for probably well over 20 years, and really nothing has changed. So to take that opportunity to open some of these trails sooner versus than later to access for mountain bikers as well. So I appreciate the chance to talk and ask for that access. And I really appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanya. Next, we have Jim Hansen.
Thank you very much. Thank you, PAC members, and I really appreciate the really thoughtful comments and questions based on the presentation tonight. I'll just respond to a couple things. I guess I would just ask everybody, part of asking other people is your own experience on trails. I know for myself, I do appreciate the wider trail. I'll hike Wildcat Creek Trail, the East Ridge and Redwood, and they're actually a way in terms of access to access some of the narrow trails we often want to get to. But not only that, they're a safe way. I have seen families with strollers, people with dogs, equestrians, mountain bikers, and hikers all use and pass each other successfully. So I don't think that should be minimized and continue to be considered. I also think in talking about trail development that Brian's presentation mentioned the amount of new natural surface trails. I think it also includes the amount of the wider trails because they are a significant trail asset in the district. To Mr. Tsutsuy's comment about Crockett Hills, I will say, I think it is important to talk to people who live in an area. I've talked to some of the people around Crockett. And one of the difficulties we are facing is, one of the comments I've heard is that it's been taken over. And that some of the folks there don't feel safe. They're jumping into the poison oak or something, not always, but enough of the time that a trail runner or walker, if all of them are multi-use narrow trails, it can become an issue and people do move away from trails. I don't go to China Peak, let's see, the park across China Camp State Park, thank you, anymore. It's heavily used and it actually can feel very concerning. And speaking of senior citizens, I know some people want to get on the mountain bikes with the e-bikes, but also others continue to want to walk, but walk safely. I think just to say a couple things, e-bikes are out there. I've seen them on all the parks. And that in the way of stewardship, fortunately, we're coming to a point of sophistication where we can identify environmentally sensitive areas, migration corridors. So anyway, thank you very much, and I'll leave it at that.
So I'm sorry, Jim, we lost the last 30 seconds. So if you want to just repeat the last maybe 3 sentences, I think you froze on us.
That's very kind. I thought it was going overtime. Simply to say, in the way of stewardship, I think it is important that we don't forget that we don't, and I want to say that the presentations, I hope, will highlight hikers again. Because I think there's could be a lot of attention at looking at mountain biking needs, and I support looking at those needs. But I was trying to think if I saw one hiker photo in the presentation, and we are a big, and I bike too, but we are a big part of the population, and it is increasing in popularity from what I can tell proportionally. So that makes it all more difficult for all of us to solve, but I don't think we should forget the hikers, and we should use our current, more sophisticated information on wildlife corridors and so forth in our planning. So again, thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim. Okay, next I have Amelia Marshall.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Amelia Marshall, representing California State Horsemen's Association, Region 5. You're going to be hearing from someone whose horse was attacked by a vicious off-leash dog. And situations like that are proof that trail use conflicts are not in our head. We've spoken quite a bit about the issues of bicycles being incompatible on narrow trails with other types of users, but we do need to think about the dog issue. There have been incidents where off-leash dogs have attacked regional parks police horses, volunteer mounted patrol people. I have helped dog bite victims myself while out on patrol. I've seen them go after people with disabilities, and they even go after bicycles. They've even gone after John Sutter. So it's a problem. The takeaway for me is we do need to reinforce our police department. I have seen quite a few exits of very wonderful police officers to surrounding agencies that pay better. I think with consistent law enforcement on trails, we would have users who know what the rules are, expect to be held accountable for their bad behavior, and will clean up their act accordingly. So I'm here to advocate for increased support of the police department, raising police salaries, and hiring more cops and getting them out on the trails to write tickets. Thank you.
Thank you, Amelia. Next, we've got Janet Biloreski.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I'm trying to get the video on. The video, oh, here I am. Hi, thanks. I'm Janet Biloreski, and I am the person with the dog attack on my horse, Prince, which is in the picture behind me, my beloved horse that I keep up in Anthony Chabot's stables. I've been very proud of my horse that it has been able to ride with dogs, bikes next to it, strollers, electric bikes, and now even skateboards that light up. So I've been very happy because not every horse can do this. And there are many riders that are fearful of things such as dog bites. I had a friend riding my horse a month ago, almost exactly, and she was going through the Grass Valley Trail in Anthony Chabot, and there was a dog that was off leash. Well, it actually was next to the owner at the time and pulled away from the owner, attacked my horse running. And my horse did bolt when it got to my horse and run, and the dog proceeded to continue after it. It bolted again, and the rider then was able to get my horse under control and got off my horse. And there the dog was underneath my horse, biting my horse's legs. It also jumped on top of my horse and, grabbed into its tail. So when she got off, she had to literally get under my horse to get the dog out from under my horse. At that point, the dog continued to circle to re-attack again after. And so she put herself, the rider, between the horse and dog, screaming, yelling, using her arms. And she used her deepest voice. The dog finally settled down. The owner came over and put the dog on a leash and walked away without even asking anything about how she was, how the horse was, after witnessing the whole event. So I do think there needs to be, park safety is a big concern for everybody, all users. And I do want to say equestrian users do have a special thing because the horses are flight animals. And I also want to add that many are afraid to use the trails because of injuries to themselves and their horses. But having said that, I feel very fortunate that right now I can ride up on the trails, except my horse is now injured and has been hospitalized. And I don't know if it can ever ride in the Oakland Hills again. I'm devastated. It's been a month and he's not improving. There was nobody there. There's no park, what is that? Park safety patrolling. And people all say that at Anthony Chabot stables. I've never seen anybody patrolling, ever. I know Point Isabel has dogs running around. It's not a East Bay park, but they do have people on bikes who give tickets or whatever they do, whatnot, to keep everything under control. People are not considerate, respectful of each other in many cases now. I don't know if it's increased anger from COVID or what, too many people, There are a lot of people that are considerate, that move their dogs over. I say
Jeanette,
hello.
I'm sorry, you're gonna have to wrap it up, please. Your time is, it's if you want to finish one sentence and then we'll move on.
I think the park police are responsible for keeping the public safe by patrolling the parks.
Thank you. Next, we have Kai Wong.
Hi, I'm Kai. I'm 11 years old and I'm a 6th grader at Harding Elementary. I am on the Wildcat Composite Middle School mountain biking team and I ride in Tilden and Wildcat Canyon about twice a week, sometimes more. During the pandemic, I was stuck at home with no friend interaction except for with video games. And mountain biking became a way to see my friends during a time when COVID was really limiting who you could see in person. Tilden and Wildcat Canyon are the only parks close enough for me to get to those parks after school to ride. And since I ride there so often, I am getting bored of the current trails that are there because I've ridden them so many times. Also, as a mountain biker, I want to improve, and without any variety of trails, I can't improve because I'm just doing the same thing over and over again. And as many of people have already said, hikers are getting angry about trails getting crowded by mountain bikers. But if there are more trails, less crowded trails, and then hikers can be happy because the bikers will go on to different spread out onto different trails. And if needed, I would be more than happy to work on the trails myself if that was a requirement to get those trails built. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have Scott Bartlebell next.
I'm Scott Bartlebell. I'm the Advocacy Director for Bicycle Trails Council of the East Bay. I'd like to thank staff for the fine presentation today and the PAC members for thoughtful questions and comments. I think this is a very good discussion that you're having. Comments were made at the last meeting. I served on the Trail User Working Group representing bike perspectives along with Austin McInerney, and we are available to help participate as you see fit. We did not come to make comment last time in that it was an introductory item on the agenda and didn't want to use up valuable time. I think some comments based on information presented today, the growth of use at Crockett Hills was significantly higher than any other parks in the district, I think, which shows a strong demand by the public where they have legal access. And even in parks that don't have a great amount of narrow trails accessible to bikes, there was still significant growth. So I think people are looking for trails closer to home. As the previous speaker, the students that are in the high school programs, having distributed access throughout the district, it would be very valuable. That doesn't mean trails need to be with bike access in every single park, but I think considerations for distribution through the district is important. I thought it was interesting. Bob Simmons talked about the Sugar City Trail and that he feels safe uphill, but doesn't feel safe downhill or chooses not to hike it downhill. Those are some of the same decisions I make when I'm riding a bike out there. And based on the use load out there, I may not choose to ride a certain trail uphill because I can expect a lot of downhill traffic. So I think users of all types have different comfort levels, different trail experiences they're looking for, and it requires people to make options. And that's part of sharing the open spaces and sharing the trails. We don't necessarily always get the prime experience that we're looking at. as we share things in these public spaces. Brian pointed out we had a trail work day this past Saturday. It was actually the 4th trail work day we've had this spring season, and we're at about 500 volunteer hours and have engaged 3 of the high school and middle school programs, and over 100 different volunteers have come out to work on the trails. So we're limited by the number of suitable crew leaders that we have. Otherwise, we would provide more opportunities there. But we do appreciate the partnering from David Kendall at Crockett Hills to make these days possible. There was a comment about diversity. I think if you come out to Crockett Hills and you look at the people that are mountain biking out there, you will see a range from elementary age up into their 70s, and you'll see people of all colors and all genders. So it is a broad spectrum. So thank you for the opportunity to comment, and thank you for your work on this, PAC members.
Thank you, Scott. Finally, I have Isaac Gonzalez.
Hi, how are you doing, everyone? For some reason, I can't start my video. Okay, there we go. All right. So first of all, I want to thank everyone for all their time and effort on this. I saw a couple kids from I'm a coach on the Wildcat Composite mountain bike team, also a resident of El Cerrito. I actually live near Rifle Range Road and the trail that's in question to get built. And it really touched my heart to see these kids, talking about the desire to ride. I remember my son is on the team, and his, once upon a time, he didn't even want to go on the trails, and I kept encouraging him and kept wanting to take him. And now he's riding with 7th and 8th graders. In the trail in question, which is near Mezu Trail, it's such a steep downhill trail. I mean, I've ridden down it countless times, and the factor of colliding with a hiker is scary. I'm sure hikers hiking up there are constantly in fear because it's hard to go slow. Building such a trail there, as well as possibly building it in other areas of the park and other East Bay regional parks, could greatly circumvent that chance. As a coach and as an active mountain biker and a participant in the mountain bike community, I'm constantly getting thwarted going to other places like Joaquin Miller, where they do have decent single track trails like Crockett, to ride because of the lack of trails in my backyard. If there were, I'd be riding in my backyard and not getting in my car and using gas to go there. I do believe in trail etiquette. I do believe in obviously a need for there to be acceptable multi-use trails. But if you look at other counties, like Marin County, they built an awesome trail called Ponte Ridge Trail that goes on for several miles. That's multi-access. It's fairly wide enough to have all kinds of trail users there, and people seem to be okay with it. And I'm just hoping that they could do the same type of adoption and mechanisms to do that, out here in my backyard, so I don't have to, leave the house. And also for the high schoolers and the middle schoolers, my son's going to be probably middle school, high school, along with all his friends, can also partake in that and don't feel that they have to go elsewhere. Last but not least, I want to just thank, everybody who gave their honest feedback and opinion, both positive, negative, because, it's because of all you that helps us kind of coexist and make these decisions that betters our community and betters our outdoor experiences, because, the outdoor experiences right now are one of the best things that we can do, especially people that are stuck in the pandemic.
I apologize, but if you could just one last sentence, and then we have to end your public comment after 3 minutes.
Yeah, I just want to finish by saying that I hope that they allow the build of the flow trail in Wildcat Canyon.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, so I'm looking to see, I don't see any other hands. I don't see any other, yeah, so I think, so this is the last opportunity, last call. Okay, with that, we're going to close the public comment on this item, which clearly is, well, it was an informational item, and I think that we received a lot of good information via the presentation from Brian, clarifying answers from Christina, and I appreciated the thoughtful comments and questions from the PAC as well as the public. And so if someone could please clarify next steps, whatever they might be. I know that there was some of this mentioned before, I believe by Christina, but Brian, if you could just wrap up this item, that would be helpful.
Yep, we'll wrap it up. Really deep thank you to all the PAC members for your very thoughtful comments, very thoughtful questions. And thank you to all the members of the public who came. This was exactly the type of discussion that I think we're hoping to have. So really very valuable to staff. And I know it can be a long slog to stick through this, but like I say, it's a big help for us. Next steps is we will be back in May with Jim O'Connor, Assistant General Manager of Operations, where we'll be starting to discuss the work plan for a pilot project at Briones.
Great, thank you so much. Now our next item, I just want to say thank you to everybody for staying on for this incredibly long meeting, but important, right? And I do have to leave at 6:45 to get to another meeting in person at 7 o'clock. So I just want to take a point of privilege, and since I'm still on here, to give 3 announcements as the PAC chair, and then I'll turn it over to Neil, our vice chair, to finish facilitating our meeting. So just 3 very quick things. I did want to let folks know, I had a good conversation with Eric today, and the topic is coming up as to, how do we want to meet going forward? And so this isn't something for us to discuss today, but please think about it, because we'll most likely put this on the agenda for May, in terms of everything from start times to, do you want to keep it at 4 o'clock or move back to 7 o'clock? How does the in-person versus virtual versus hybrid, what are people's thoughts about that? So I just want folks to be thinking about your preference in advance of our next meeting. The second item, I want to personally reassure all of you. I know that we've been saying this for 5 months, but I do want to be clear that work does continue on clarifying the role of the PAC and how the PAC can provide meaningful input to the board regarding the board's work plan. So I do want to personally assure you that those conversations are underway. And in fact, Bob Simmons, myself, and Michelle Lacey had a chance to connect directly with board director Lane a few weeks ago. So there is work happening at all levels, and we hope to be able to discuss this important topic more whenever there's more of an official proposal available for us to discuss as a PAC. So wanted you to know we haven't forgotten about it. Work does continue. And then the last item, it has been brought to my attention that our regularly scheduled September meeting coincides with Rosh Hashanah. And so staff will be sending out a doodle poll to everyone to see, what other Monday would work better for our September meeting, so that we're not in conflict with that important holiday. So those are my items. I want to thank everybody. I'm going to turn it over to Neil. And again, I apologize. I got to pop out to something in person. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair Obringer, for all the heavy lifting. And I get the glory of taking us all across the finish line tonight. So moving on to our next item on the agenda, we have item number 7, staff comments. Eric?
Yeah, thanks, Neil. And I'll just keep it brief because Carlin pretty much said what I was going to say. I just want to assure the PAC that I'm having weekly conversations with our deputy general manager about moving forward some information about what the roles of the PAC is, and just sort of that whole concept of reimagining. So every week we have a conversation, and I anticipate having something to share with the group by next week, but our next meeting. But knowing how late it is, I think that's probably all we have to say for this meeting.
Great, thanks, Eric. And on to our next item then is PAC member comments. Do any members of the PAC have comments that they'd like to make at this time? I see Rick's hand up. Rick?
Just a quickie. I want to let everybody know that the Niles Canyon Stroll and Roll is happening this Sunday. So check it out.
Thanks, Rick. Annie.
Hi, just real quick that I'm Together Bay Area is hosting a conference in 3 weeks, and I'll drop a link in the chat and would love to see you all there.
Great, thanks, Annie. And I see Irene's hand.
I just want to thank Director Corbett for hanging out with us the entire time. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Director Corbett. Linda.
I just really want to shout out to the East Bay Regional Park District staff over there at Del Val Regional Park. I participated this weekend in a music festival, and the partnership that was created out there and the ability to bring in families and diversity and culture and art to Del Val was just a fabulous experience. And I spoke to many East Bay Regional Park people, and I also visited the new Interpretation Center, and I suggest people go down there and check it out.
Great, thanks, Linda. Any other comments from the PAC? Igor. You're still muted, Igor. Nope, it looks like you're still muted.
Probably a good thing. I just wanted to, again, take an opportunity to cite the great experience we had at the multicultural walk at Miller Knox this past weekend. These are ongoing programs that continue over time. And so I would really encourage everybody to take advantage of them. It's really a very, came out of it feeling much better in a lot of different ways.
Great, thank you, Igor. Susie.
Yeah, there's so much going on. This question I had, I wanted to bring up, what's the easiest, best way to find out about all these opportunities? I have heard of the multicultural walks. I'm not sure what Linda was talking about, over at Del Val. So I don't know, anybody know? Can we have like a bulletin board or something?
And I think there is a calendar on the Park District webpage that lists events. And then there's also the hard copy mailer that goes out. Its name is escaping me at the moment. But
yeah, regional in nature, the RIN. Yeah, but well, okay, I'll check the RIN. Maybe the Del Val thing was in there. I'm not sure the multicultural walks are. But anyway, thank you. Just so many opportunities.
That's right. Director Corbett, is that your hand up?
Yes, and I know I'm not on the board of directors, but I just wanted to just mention once again, Luana Espana, who's going to be a potentially new PAC member. She's still with us too. She's listened to the entire meeting tonight, and give her another chance just to say hi. She's still here with us, and introduce you to her, Luana Espana. Thank you, Luana, for being here with us.
Thank you for having me.
Great, yeah, thanks for sticking around, Luana. And I hope you enjoyed the in-depth discussion of our trail use policy. So a taste of what's to come.
I did, and I enjoyed definitely hearing the comments from the public, and then also just the use of data in Brian's report. And that's the first time I've really seen Strava data used in reports. So it was a nice way to see that increase in bike rides and user groups in the park.
And welcome, Luana.
Yeah, welcome. We're looking forward to having you. Any other comments from members of the PAC? No? Okay, then we move on to report from the chair. So Chair Obringer already made her comments before leaving. Board committee reports. Are there any board committee reports from anyone? I don't see any hands for that. So old business, I think we have none. New business, I believe we have none. And so I'm happy to adjourn this meeting of the East Bay Regional Parks Advisory Committee at 6:48 p.m. I hope you all go on and have a delicious dinner and a restful evening.